permit me to deviate a bit from the sequence of presentations. We've had on CubeSat designs for asteroid missions, comets, or a particular star or particular orbit. So here I'll be talking about attitude control, specifically for the design for ESTCube-2 Nanosatellite. So the ESTCube-2 Nanosatellite is the second satellite to be designed by the Estonian Students Satellite Program, which with its partners, including the Finnish Meteorological Institute. The first of this satellite was launched in 2013 with the main goal of testing E-cell propulsion system, which was talked about by Peppa yesterday. So the ESTCube would mainly focus on the plasma break experiment as one of its main objectives. So the ESTCube basically is a 3-unit CubeSat, like I said, with the main objective of demonstrating the plasma break deorbiting experiment. We also have Earth observation payloads, coating resistant experiment, and corrosion by researchers at the University of Tartu. So the design is mainly done by students from the University of Tartu as well as other partners. And also the ESTCube-3 platform. So basically we'll be testing the technology for ESTCube-3, which is meant for the lunar orbit. So I will quickly talk about the dynamics of the satellite with respect to the attitude controllers that will be designed for ESTCube-2. So this is done all in-house. So the satellite dynamics is based on the linearization with reaction wheels, because we want to design a particular attitude controller that would meet the requirement for precise pointing. So in order to attain this, we need to probably design a linearized controller, the Linear Quadratic Regulator. And for this, we linearize the dynamics of the satellite with respect to reaction wheels. We also linearize the dynamics of the satellite with respect to the magnetoker, because we have 3 actuators on board the satellite: the magnetokers, reaction wheels, and cool gas thrusters, which will be meant mainly to test the technology for ESTCube-3, which will be in the lunar orbit. So basically, this linearization is done with respect to the angular momentum included for the reaction wheels. And we give the assumptions for lateral pointing, which is what we'll be focused on. So we assume the angular velocity rate is approximately 0, because that's actually what we want to get at an equilibrium point. And both frames will be aligned with minimal error of because we use quaternions as our attitude parameterization. So that basically we assume that this point be 0. And of course, we use a Taylor series expansion for this purpose. So basically, we define the state space model to be in form of the standard state space system, where we have different functions based on the parameters of the satellite with respect to the moment of inertia, the mass of the satellite, and all of that. And then, of course, this defines our control torque, which is what we will actually be looking at for the attitude pointing. Here again is the linearization with respect to the magnetic torque, which is the magnetokers, but basically it follows the same system as the dynamics of the previous case. However, we make reference to the magnetic field of the Earth. This is based on the following parameters, including the magnetic field dipole strength, because the magnetic field is modeled with respect to the magnetic dipole. And then, of course, we also have the orbit angular velocity, and we talk about the inclination with respect to this particular attitude. So basically, for the attitude modes in ESTCube-2 in particular, we have the detumbling, which is of course to detumble the satellite at to about the spin rate of about 0.1 degrees per second after orbital insertion. And then, of course, we have the pointing, which is fundamental attitude control task. And we have for some pointing, ground location tracking, navigation pointing, Earth observation, and so on. So basically, we have a 0.25 degree accuracy, which is our expectation, basically, initial, based on initial calculations, and 0.125 degrees per second stability. And finally, we have a spin-up. So this spin-up is meant to generate enough angular momentum for tether deployment for the plasma break deorbiting experiment. So the aim of this is to spin the satellite up to about 360 degrees per second, which should be, because we actually need about 44 Newton-meter-second angular momentum for this purpose. So basically, because we want to test this both in low Earth orbit and lunar orbit, we make use of magnetic core and reaction wheels, and also reaction wheels and cold glass thrusters in lunar orbit. So the control structure is similar to normal control structures for different systems. We have the control algorithm and our actuators, the magnetic talkers, reaction wheels from Hyperion Technologies. We have cold gas thrusters as well. Then we have spacecraft satellite dynamics and the sensor. So the sensor block represents the altitude determination, altitude estimation. So for the sensors, we have magnetometers, we have accelerometers, gyroscopes, sun sensor, and of course star tracker. So for specific controller design, so first I'll talk about the popular V-dot algorithm. However, this algorithm is just meant for low Earth orbit, so it's a rather simple algorithm, and I won't go into much details about this. But it's basically to decrease the kinetic energy of the angular, to reduce the angular momentum through decreasing the kinetic energy of the satellite. Cross-product law. So this control algorithm is specific for this design because we are trying to use the reaction wheel to generate just about have a maximum angular momentum of about 1.5 millimeter-meter-second, and so this would not be sufficient for actual precise pointing. So we use this control law basically to unload the reaction wheels with magnetokers. We could also do it with cold gas thrusters, but this has not been implemented yet. So basically, we just implement the angular momentum error from the reaction wheels once it's saturated. So we can be able to, at that point, we know that the reaction wheel is saturated. So we use the error from this reaction wheel to be able to calculate the torque that will be required from the magnetic torques. Then the novel of the design here is the Linear Quadratic Regulator. And so this begins with, of course, the state space form. Basically, what we're trying to attain here is to design a control gain based on this linear quadratic cost function. So the gain should be able to minimize this cost function for us to be able to design obtain an actual control torque. So the control torque defined as U here, which is a feedback control, is based on this equation. And of course, the value P is a symmetric positive semi-definite solution of the standard Observatory equation. So once we're able to solve this Observatory equation, then we can be able to get this value and get our desired feedback control torque. The important thing to note is that these are the state matrix A and input matrix B. This has to be controllable. We have to define the property, controllability property, in order to be able to solve this particular equation. So the algorithm is just based on defining the control outputs, what we actually want, and identify what variables we are going to be controlling, basically. And then we define the performance index, based on setting time, accuracy, and all of that. And then we obtain the model based on the actuator which we're using specifically. And then we'll specify the parameters for the controller, which are the Q and R matrices. Then we optimize this parameter based on our feedback loop to be able to get our actual desired result. And then we can implement the design based on our specifications. Finally, it's the angular rate control. So this is based on spin-up to generate about 360 degrees per second. So this is just a simplified control law, but the steps are actually a bit more complicated. So in general, what we're trying to do is to generate this spin-up around the x-axis of the satellite. So that's why we have this here, why we activate basically the angular momentum in the y and the z axis. So as we're trying to do this, also we are ensuring that we don't have rotation or precession along the transverse axis, the y and the z axis. So we have a selection matrix here which tries to control these parameters in the y and z axis. Basically, so we obtain the magnetic dipole moment in this spacecraft body reference frame, and this is the actual desired control which we will be implementing for this. Again, this is based on magnetokers, but we are going to design that based on using the reaction wheels and cold gas process. So This is just a simulation result based on the tumbling. You can see that we obtained the actual desired result, but again, this is not going to be useful for our ESTCube-3 platform. So we are going to design better systems for this purpose. Here is the result for the cross-product law, and here we can see that at this point we have some form of saturation in the reaction wheels. So basically, from the angular momentum results, we can see that the reaction wheel is saturated at 1.5 milliliters per second. And this is at this point, this is when the magnetic coils are enabled, and then they unload the reaction wheels while also attaining fine pointing. Again, this cross-product law is based on the standard PD control that we implemented with the magnetic coils. So these are the results initial results for the LPR with magnetic tokers. We have the angular velocity, although this takes quite a while because of the change in magnetic field. We can see that we actually obtained the desired result at pretty good accuracy here. Same with the reaction wheels with the LPR control. This is a shorter period because, of course, the reaction wheel is able to provide us 5 points in a site without the influence of the X magnetic field. And finally, we have spin-up results. This presents the result of the spin-up algorithm. Basically, what we have to implement here is to implement this spin-up in several phases. Okay, so this is not just done at one straight spin-up, because if you do this one straight spin-up, you notice that the satellite tends to tumble based on the mutation along the canvas axis, the Y and Z axis. So we try to implement these at different stages to ensure that the spin axis is aligned with X polar axis at this point in order to get this particular design. Okay, so for the future works of this IC control design for ESTCube-2, the magnetic controllers have to, the gain has to be optimized for all the controllers with the magnetic tokers. Also, we have to design the angular stimulus controller with reaction wheels, and of course the transfer force with modulation control will be very efficient here. And then, of course, finally, fault detection and isolation based on physics scheme. This is the SAT work which is being done at the moment. So, thank you for your attention.
Okay, we have time for questions.
So you plan to spin up to 1 revolution per second,
Yes.
And then maintain your pointing of the overall main axis to 2 degrees. Have you simulated yet how well you will do with respect to that 2 degrees?
This particular simulation, the pointing is different from the spin-up. So the spin-up, what we're trying to actually do is to ensure the spin axis is pointed directly, so there's no error between the spin axis and the X polar axis. But for the pointing, that's actually a different for Earth observation or for the high-speed communication antenna or something else. So, but that's actually a different requirement.
Imagine to deploy the tether, you still wouldn't want it to be tumbling at that time, so you'd still require some pointing.
Yes, of course it does, but this is actually just the initial design based on the particular spin-up. So we will also have time during the summer to implement this particular pointing for this purpose for the tether deployment.
Thank you.
Any further questions? In that case, let's thank our speaker.